So welcome to our free weekly group advisory session, and thanks for joining. The topic of this session is actions your business can take to survive the coronavirus crisis. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Charles, and I'm going to kick this meeting off with a brief introduction before turning over to my father, who's sitting just 6 feet away from me. He's my co-founder as well, Nick Gunn, for a quick background on the NiVACK Group. Then Nick will walk us through a few pages of our coronavirus crisis survival guide, which you can download for free from our website if you haven't already. Then we'll spend some time in the general Q&A at the end of the session, but I encourage you guys to speak up and ask questions as Nick goes through the different sections of our guide. Again, to do that, you just have to come off mute, which should be a little button on your screen. There's some planned structure to this meeting in that we will go through some slides, but it's really what you guys make of it. So feel free to participate, come off mute, talk to us whenever you want. Also, when you do come off mute and ask a question or say something, please provide just a quick intro of yourself and your company. I'd love to know the size of your business, what industry you're in, and the difficulties you're facing. As a quick note, this is not intended for self-promotion for ourselves or any of our callers. Many of you guys are our friends and owners and operators of our favorite local spots. So we just want to help you get through this crisis. We want to make sure all of us get through this crisis together. So with that in mind, I'll turn it over to you, Deb.
Thanks, Charlie. I appreciate that. Thanks, everybody, for joining. I hope everybody's keeping safe. These are very interesting times. So as Charlie said, we're practicing our social distancing here. So we are 6 feet apart in our own home. But anyway, that aside, I thought what I would do is kind of start and just give a little bit of background. So we're actually a fairly new business, the NiVACK Group. We just started last year. And our plan was that we would bring enterprise scale experience and strategic thinking to small businesses to help them be more profitable. And we started to do that. So a little bit about my background. I actually worked for Hewlett-Packard and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise for almost 30 years as essentially the chief operating officer. So I ran everything from operations, procurement, real estate, travel, fleet, security, aviation, all sorts of things like that. And what we used to do, we were always being asked to cut costs and save money and make the business more efficient and effective. So after I left the company early last year, decided with Charlie that we would start this small business, the NiVACK Group, and try to bring that experience to help smaller and mid-sized businesses benefit from some of that. So we kicked it off, and we were doing quite well. And then along came the coronavirus, and like the rest of you, we started to find ourselves in uncharted territory. So Charlie and I and my other colleagues, Sean, Michael, Stephanie, we decided that what we wanted to do was to kind of pivot and put our sort of business mission, if you like, on hold and sort of focus on our customers and our clients and try to figure out how we could help other small businesses kind of survive in this crisis. Because really, we went very quickly from business as usual to business as unusual, as I've heard somebody say. And that really put everybody in a situation where suddenly the customers and the clients that we all came to rely on are no longer able to do business with us. It started with the entertainment and travel industry. We saw the cruise lines get hit heavily, and then the airlines and the hotel industry. And all of these industries have what I consider to be a very perishable inventory. For example, if you don't sell a hotel room, tonight's hotel rooms today, then you don't get an opportunity to sell them tomorrow because that's tomorrow's inventory you're looking at. So those industries started to get hit really hard. And then it started to spread further into other industries, particularly other service-based industries. So I started to see restaurants and bars, and then it was doctors and dentists and nail salons, and basically everything that wasn't considered to be critical to the running of the country and surviving in this crisis. So clearly what we have, especially here in the US over the last week or so, we've had a lot of action by the government and the states and local government to try to control what's going on right now. We've had stimulus packages, etc., and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well later. But what we thought we would do is start to talk about some of the things that we had done previously with other clients and in other companies, where the situation was similar but for different reasons. So a lot of companies go through situations where they have troubled times. So, for example, companies might find that their supply chains have been disrupted because a supplier goes out of business. They might find that they have issues because their marketplace is contracting, or a new competitor's come along with a different technology that can really take away their market share. So what we're going to try to do is take some of the things that we've done in the past and share them with you guys. So with that, let's move to the next page, Chuck. So we can actually go a couple forward. I don't want to talk about this. So what I wanted to talk about here is there's really 5 components. We published a guide that's free on our website, and I know many of you have picked this up already. We published a guide that really focuses on 5 key areas here. First of those is managing cash flows, and this is really important for companies because most businesses, I read an article the other day, most businesses in the United States, believe it or not, barely have enough cash to survive 1 month. So that's something that's going to be really important. So we're going to cover that. Planning for reduced sales, that's another area. When there's reduced sales, then you need to figure out what that looks like and how that affects your supply chains and your inventory, your product, etc., and your planning. We're going to talk a little bit about labor strategy as well, because I think that's really important. Most of the people that I've been talking to recently, the 3 things that have been mostly on their minds are how to manage their cash, how to manage their workforce, and then their capital expenditures, particularly around things like real estate. 4th area is marketing spend and what you can do to pivot on your marketing spend. And then the 5th area is capital expenditures. So I know each of you here represent different businesses, so please feel free to ask questions that are specific to your business, and then we'll try to be more specific with our answers. Let's move to the next page. So I'm going to start with cash flows here, and a couple of things first of all that I wanted to speak about is that what is really important right now for most businesses is to adapt and adapt to the circumstances in front of us. So I think everybody's heard the phrase, plan for the worst and hope for the best. And I would say that's never been more true than it is now. Originally, I heard the president say that we were going to have, the 2-week, quote, lockdown. And then last weekend, I think that got extended until the end of April. So now the 2 weeks is now 6 weeks. So I know many of the people I talked about were thinking about things they could do to survive 2 weeks. Now people are trying to figure out how they're going to survive 6 weeks. What I'm going to ask you guys to do as you think about your business is think about how what you need to do to survive longer than that. And what if things don't quite come back to the normal that we had before? So first of all, let's talk about cash. This is probably singularly the most important thing that enables businesses to stay afloat. And there's 3 things, the first 3 things I look at are cash management. Days payable, days receivable, and inventory. These things, when they're combined together, are what we call cash conversion cycles. So it really is the speed at which you can convert your sales to cash and how long you can keep cash in your bank. So the 3 things here that I wanted to focus on. So first of all, increasing days payable. So each of you guys should have contracts with your suppliers, your vendors, and there'll be contract terms in there. And those contract terms, in part, will dictate the speed at which you are expected to pay your suppliers. Maybe it is a net 30 days, meaning 30 days from when a supplier invoices you is when they get paid. There's 2 things that I find happen here. One is that often companies are pretty efficient, and when they get their invoices in, they pay them straight away. So you should definitely start talking to your payables team or your payables person, whoever runs that, and make sure that they're not paying any invoices sooner than they need to. And then the second element is, can you go and talk to your suppliers? And by the way, your suppliers are in this together with you. And one of the things that we would recommend is having a conversation with suppliers to ask them if they'd be willing to extend their payment terms so that they're still getting paid, but maybe it's a little bit later. And then working with those suppliers, that will also give you a good idea of which suppliers are willing to do that, because those suppliers that are the ones that you really want to be long-term partners with. Because as I said before, we're all in this together, and I've already had instances or heard instances of suppliers not willing to help their clients. Well, quite frankly, I understand their position, but as I said previously, the element of everybody being in this together is really important. If you are a supplier and your customer goes out of business, then that means you don't have that customer to sell your product to in the future. So it is important for them to share in some of the pain as well. Receivables is another area that is that's really important. I know that a lot of small businesses have trouble with getting payments in from their own customers. And again, now you're the supplier to the customer, you want your payment. So if you can reduce the time it takes to get those receivables in, then that's going to be something that's critical to you. One of the things I would suggest as well is maybe offering, again, to be flexible with your customers, maybe offer them some kind of a discount or extended warranty or free shipping or another customer incentive to get them to pay you, because getting that cash in is actually going to be more important to you in the short term than whether or not you made 100% or 90% or whatever on your revenue. The third area of cash management that's really important here is reducing your inventory. So whatever business you're in, a lot of businesses do carry inventory. We have, dentists, for example, will carry inventory in terms of the stuff that they need to do fillings, to do crowns and things like that. So then the question becomes, how much inventory do I need? Can I order on a slower cycle from my suppliers? And then you have less inventory that I'm sitting on, especially if you're in a business right now that has been reduced significantly. So definitely want to do all you can to reduce your inventory. So I'm going to pause for a second, see if anybody's got any questions specifically on cash flows here, on cash management. I think you have to come off mute, right?
Yeah, you do.
So there should be
Hi, Nick, this is Stephanie. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Stephanie, go ahead.
Quick question going back to seeing if suppliers will, change their terms. It's really nice to ask, but they don't necessarily, they need cash as much as I do. So what kind of levers can I pull in this particular case?
I think, Stephanie, in this particular case, there's a couple of things that I would recommend. One is to offer something to them that they find valuable. So you have to do a little bit of research, understand your supplier, maybe try to figure out what kind of situation that they're in. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing to let these guys know is that any help they can give you is going to help you stay in business. If you're still in business when this crisis abates, then you're going to be buying products and services from them again. And I think that's really important, because at the end of the day, that if the markets themselves start to shrink, then everybody's going to be competing. All those suppliers are going to be competing for a slice of a smaller pie. So I think that's how I would tackle this particular situation with suppliers. Good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have one more item D here to discuss.
Okay. Oh yes, gift cards. So this is kind of an interesting one. As I've been talking to a lot of people I know in the retail trade, people have been saying, well, it's great, we'll be selling gift cards and we'll still be getting revenue coming in. And this is good, and it does help because revenue will be coming in. The problem is that The trouble with gift cards, I should say, is that they're a liability on the balance sheet. So if you sell a $100 gift card today, then you're going to have to provide $100 worth of service at some point in the future. So that will cost you money in the future, because you're going to have to pay out for your cost of goods on that. If you're a restaurant, you're going to have to provide, for example, a meal in the future for the $100 value. One of the things that we've been discussing with some of our clients is still using gift cards, but incenting people to use the gift cards now, for example, if it's a restaurant for takeout food, and then giving them a discount on it if they use it in the next 30 days, because that way you don't carry the liability beyond the next 30 days. You're giving a discount, so people are coming in and they're actually redeeming their gift cards, gift vouchers at this point in time. So it creates a little less liability for you, and again, it continues to provide a vehicle to increase your cash flow, to get cash in to help your business survive. So I'm going to pivot now to third-party spend management, and this is kind of important. When you work for a large corporation, as I did, I would have a big procurement function that was able to go out and manage our third-party spend. We could manage our marketing spend, our labor spend, our real estate, and there were a lot of people with a lot of expertise to do that. Smaller businesses don't have that capability. So what we've tried to put together here is just a little bit of discussion on some of the things that smaller businesses that have a few employees to maybe several hundred can put in place. So the first of those is demand and consumption policies and controls. So really, the one thing that I would say to everybody is look at everything that you spend money on and ask the question, is this a critical thing to spend money on right now? For example, if I don't spend money on this, is it going to have a negative impact on my customer? Is this mission critical? Will my business fail if I don't spend money on this? Because if the answer to those questions is no, then don't spend the money. That was my advice right now, is don't spend any money that is not absolutely critical. So you really have to think about that, and you really have to dig into both your cost of goods sold that you incur when you sell a product or service, and your overhead cost as well. Do you need to continue to subscribe, for example, to the Wall Street Journal, or do you need to continue to have a membership at a local gym that you provide your employees with? Those are the things that you should think about and say, hey, these are not mission critical, these are not customer related, so I'm going to stop doing it. The second part here, again, is kind of renegotiating with key suppliers. So we talked a little bit about it with respect to days payable. But this is another area that maybe you can go back to your suppliers, again, with the same premise that you're trying to stay in business, and try to see if you can get lower prices. Maybe you can get them to give you some other benefits here that don't cost them too much money. For example, maybe they can ship stuff to you for free if that's what you need. But try to figure out what is really important to you, and then what is really important to them, and then see if you can get them to work with you to create a better deal that is going to keep you guys both working now and set you up more with opportunity to do better business in the future. So I think that's really important. And then, here's another thing. If a supplier doesn't want to do that, if they're adamant that they don't want to give you discounts, and they're adamant that they don't want to improve your terms, and you know that there are other suppliers out there, then this is a buyer's market. So take advantage of that and go and run a sourcing event. Go and bid these guys against each other and see who is going to give you the better deal. Because quite frankly, if suppliers don't want to work with you now to keep your business, then you have every right to go and compete them and see who wants to be your supplier in the future. So I'll pause again, see if there's any questions on any of this. Okay, let's go to the next page. So the third part of our cash is king section is I'm not going to talk about too much, is business interruption insurance. I know some businesses have this. a lot of businesses don't. Typically it's very expensive, and it provides coverage if there's some kind of a business interruption. If you do have this, or maybe you don't know that you have it, but you should go check with your insurance provider and find out what kind of coverage you have, and if it is actually, if it will actually pay you any money, if you can claim against it in this particular environment. So let's pivot now to real estate, because this is another area where typically cash is going out. And I know there's been a lot of stuff on the news recently about real estate. But the first thing that I would say here is, you know, grab your real estate list, see what the current terms are, and then go speak to your landlord. And the way that I would encourage you to do this is to really understand what your situation is and what you need to ask for from your landlord. Are you going to ask for a rent holiday? Are you going to ask for a kind of deferral? What are you going to ask for is really important here. So for example, if you pay $5,000 a month in rent, and you figured out that if you only had to pay 50% of that for the next 3 months, that would be helpful, then that's what you need to go ask your landlord for. If you think that it's something different, then you need to figure out what it is that you want to ask your landlord for. One of the things that I would discourage you from doing is just going to your landlord, or any supplier for that matter, but in this case your landlord, and asking what they can do for you, because it's not a very specific ask, and it doesn't lend them with the creativity to understand your situation so that they can provide you with some kind of value that, again, is important to you. And again, let me contextualize this. So there's a lot of landlords out there. There's big landlords and there's small landlords. And there are going to be businesses that cease to do business over the next few weeks and months. And what that's going to do, it's going to create additional inventory in the market, and it's going to create downward pressure on rents and leases. Maybe not initially, but in the future. So my advice, if you're renting, my advice if you're a landlord, is to be creative now, work with your tenants, for tenants to work with their landlords, because at the end of the day, you want to be in a position where as this crisis abates and we come out the other side, that you can, as a tenant, have got a good relationship with your landlord. The landlord and the tenant are still both in business. That is the optimum. It is not great for landlords to start losing tenants because they go out of business. When they lose tenants, they lose rent. So it doesn't really matter what that says in the contract about, you know, how much is left on the lease term. If they're out of business, no rent is going to be paid. You know, they can go through bankruptcy court and stuff like that. But the reality is, it's not a good situation for anybody. So we actually have a supplemental guide on that. If you email Charlie, he'll be able to provide that to you. Let's go to, actually I'll stop for a second.
We did have one question.
There's one question. Okay.
What if your landlord is unwilling to negotiate with you? What if you request rent deferral and they say no?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think the answer is really going to be it depends. Okay, so if you're in a situation, let's say you're, and actually I did have this conversation with a business that I work with. If the landlord says that they're unwilling to do anything, and you have a business that can migrate fairly seamlessly from where you are today to another lease, another landlord, let's say maybe you're a nail salon or a hair salon, and you don't have a lot of infrastructure there, and all you have to do is kind of pick up your stuff and move somewhere else, then I would actually say, depending upon your lease terms, that is an option for you. That is definitely an option, is to go find somewhere else that will provide a better deal. Again, you have to think, if the landlord doesn't want to do that, then and you go out of business, they don't have your business. And secondly, at the end of the term, if they are not willing to do anything and you're still with them, you can move somewhere else and make that known to them. I would say, I would definitely make it known that you've got options, and don't be afraid to talk to your landlords on this stuff.
I have a question.
Hey, Mimi.
Hi. So as we know, 2/3 of our economy is backed by small business owners.
Yep.
And right now, within 13 days, we saw the occupancy in the shopping center and everywhere is going down by 6%. And that's within only 13 days.
Yep.
So what do you expect for commercial real estate? And what's your advice for people who are in escrow right now buying commercial real estate, even though they're getting SBA loan with 0 down payment, but like looking at the economy and the way it's going, I'm still optimistic, because I do think that since the election is going to be in October, Trump is going to do his best to keep the economy to do a quick economy recovery after the country opens up. So I'm still optimistic, but at the same time, worst case scenario, as you said, plan for the worst and hope for the best. So worst case scenario, what do you see in the commercial real estate, and as far as occupancy and like people losing, like having more available spaces, and people who are in escrow buying commercial building right now?
It's a great question, Mimi, and you know, I like to be optimistic about it, and I like you think the economy will recover fairly quickly, but I do think that in the short to medium term, we will see a change in the supply and demand dynamics. I think that there will become more supply. I think the supply will increase. So in real estate terms, the days of supply for commercial real estate, for retail, is going to increase for certain, because companies that are no longer able to keep their doors open are going to be vacating those properties. So there will be more on the market. When there's more on the market, as you know, more supply than there is demand, it will start to depress prices. So I don't know. If people are in escrow right now, you know, if I was in escrow, if I was in escrow on something right now, I might consider, you know, pulling out and waiting to see what happens with the market. If the prices go down, then, you know, go find something. Maybe go find the same property at a lower price. I think that is. I think that's where the market will go, just purely because of what I've seen in other recessions. And when businesses close, that commercial real estate will be available, and when there's more available, it depresses the price. I mean, I'd like to say something different, but it's just laws of supply and demand economics.
And I do think that commercial real estate will take a bigger hit than residential real estate in general. Because
yeah, I do.
Prices right now in residential real estate, in a comparison with 2008 and 9, went way up. So even if we get a little dip, it's not going to dip back to 2008.
I think you're right. And I think there's another dynamic that's in play right now. And we're actually a good example. So we're on a webinar. We're using Zoom conference call. And what this is going to do, it's going to force a lot of companies to reevaluate their real estate strategy. And they should do, because I always encourage people to think of a piece of real estate like an airplane. So if you get on an airplane that has 100 seats and 50 of them are empty, that means that you're only getting half the revenue from that airplane. When I go to companies, especially companies that have a decent amount of real estate, I walk around their buildings and I see empty desks, empty conference rooms, you know, maybe only 50% of the space is occupied. I look at that and I say, well, if I was an investor or an owner in this company, I have got twice as much real estate as I need, because we are not using it properly. And I start to tell people, think about real estate more like the spaces that you have in your home. The typical American real estate model for offices would be, you know, you go into an office, everybody's got a cube and they do everything from that cube. They have, you know, if they're working on spreadsheets, they'll do it from their cube. If they've got a meeting, they'll have it in their cube. If they need a private conversation, they do it in their cube. And start thinking about real estate more like rooms in your house. Real estate should be designed, especially commercial real estate, for specific purposes. If you need to have private meetings, then the company should design meeting spaces for those private meetings. If you need other collaborative space, then it should be designed with collaborative space. If you need to have space where people can work quietly, then there should be quiet space. And you wouldn't think, for example, of cooking dinner in the kitchen in your house, or using your bathroom to sleep in. But that's what we do in the traditional American office model. We use the same space to perform all the different tasks. So what I think is going to happen is that companies will start to reevaluate how they use their space. They will start to divide it up differently so it can be used for specific tasks. And then I think what they'll do is ultimately make the decision to have less of it. Because what this crisis is going to teach a lot of companies is that they don't need the amount of real estate they've got, for one. And secondly, whatever real estate they've got, they're going to now see an opportunity to use it differently. So I think longer term, it will have an impact on the marketplace. And I don't know if anybody's got anything else.
Yeah, hey Nick, this is Sean Michael. I think you touched on it. I think you were spot on. I think ultimately this is about how we adapt, right? I think fundamentally, employers are going to have to pivot, and everyone's going to change behaviors, right? I mean, quotas don't disappear. Revenues are still needed. Suppliers are still mission critical, right? So we have to get really savvy with these virtual technologies, right? We have to change the way we sell. We have to change the way we think about our workplace. And you touched on it right there. I think the view of our workplace going forward is going to be significantly different, because I think what this healthcare crisis has highlighted is we've had a pretty antiquated view of our real estate model, right? You need a place to go to run a business, or you need a place to go to meet customers, or you need a place to have all your people to come to collaborate and work together. I think that'll change. I think, we're using these technologies right now. I think there'll be more innovations that actually come out of this. If there's any silver lining, I think there'll be some innovations that come out of this. But I think fundamentally people are going to have to completely rearrange their brain on how they approach everything, how their customers, their suppliers, and I think that's the most fundamental thing about this is we're going to change our behaviors because of this, and whether we like it or not, right? So the stuff you talked about contractually is kind of like what you do right now. I think, 30,000 foot view and looking forward, I think everyone needs to change the way they view the workplace, because I think it's going to be much, much different. So, that would be what I would add to that conversation.
I think you're right. And when I think about the workplace as well, I think about things like travel. Teleconferencing like this, video conferencing. I would be encouraging my clients to use this kind of thing in the future for all non-customer facing travel. If you don't have to go meet the customer face to face to do business, if you've got internal meetings and training, you should be running them through, a tool like Zoom or Google Hangouts or whatever, because that's a way that you can repurpose your cash to spend on things that are going to generate, profitable revenue from you. Sales guys, feet on the street, meeting with clients, that's generating profitable revenue. Having internal meetings, not so much. I'm not saying they're not important, but it's a different perspective.
Yeah, I would agree. I think just touch on that real quick before we move on. As you know, obviously I worked with you, but I've managed, $1 billion of travel spend for HP and HPE. And there was, when the company wasn't doing well, it was nothing as tumultuous or challenging as this time, right? Or kind of shocking to the country's system. But when we had things like the Paris attacks or, 9/11 or otherwise, we were the first place that they would go to cut back money, to cut back costs, because it's pretty easy to take that discretionary spend out of travel. You're spot on. The way we interact even with customers going forward, what this crisis has all done is you still need to sell, right? You still need to get revenues for your company. And if you can't go face to face with someone and have lunch, then you're gonna have to do it over these technologies, right? And so it's not only, well, I would actually encourage everyone to look at your policies for all travel, right? Or all expense related things, because even for face-to-face customer things, we're gonna have to get used to this now. It's not gonna be, you're not even be able to get on a plane for, I don't know, is it 30 days? Is it 30 more days on top of that?
Yep.
So you're right. I would take this time to look at all policies and processes related to all travel. Get really savvy with these type of technologies across your enterprise, and if you're a small business or otherwise. Because I think, to your point, Nick, it really starts to beg the question, why haven't we been doing this before? Why did this event trigger us to start using virtual technologies? I mean, they're pretty seamless. It's easy to communicate. You can have, groups of people. So I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. That was a good discussion. Let's go to the next page here. We talked a little bit about this, so I can go through it more quickly. But the sort of consider right sizing. So again, this comes back to: do you need the space? Are you going to use it differently in the future? And then the other thing, and this kind of tags a little bit onto Mimi's question, is think about renegotiating leases right now. If you've only got maybe a year or so left on a lease, maybe now's a good time, if you're comfortable doing it, renegotiating with the landlord for an extension, because maybe what they'll do is give you a break on the costs, or give you a little bit of a payment holiday or something, so you're in a better position to do some negotiation. And I think, just sort of coming back to this, one of the things that I wanted to sort of talk about, I know there are many small businesses out there, service industry businesses. I think about opticians, dentists, doctors. A lot of these, my chiropractor, for example, if this situation continues, beyond even the 30th of April, then how do those businesses continue? Do we need to start thinking differently about how we manage the interaction between, our employees and our customers and each other? So, for example, maybe if you're an optician, you're not considered to be super critical right now unless it's, an emergency. So how do people come in for their eye test? Do you have to create a new set of procedures so that customers can stay more isolated, so that you are, you're sanitizing your equipment differently and more frequently? Does that then mean you need to reconfigure your office environment, your clinical environment, so you can create something that is more long-term? So these are things that I would encourage you to think about. When I talk about adapting, that's the kind of thing that we need to think about. So the final part here, loans and interest rates. I'm not going to cover this in a lot of detail. There's been a lot of new developments over the weekend about SBA loans and what businesses can do here if they keep employees on the payroll, that they can turn those loans into grants. But I would definitely encourage you. We've got some more information later in the guide, so take a read of that. And there's more and more information out there right now. And ultimately, this is something that I think you can go to the SBA, you can go to your bank and ask questions about. And then the other part is about refinancing. This was an interesting one because interest rates have dropped, and I know many people have been asking me the question, well, why are mortgage rates going up? And that is, or maybe not going up, but definitely not coming down. And I know we've got Mimi here, and she's a realtor, so maybe she can provide some added commentary on this. But the part of the issue there is that I think there's two issues going on. One, banks are seeing a great deal of demand for lower interest rates. I think they're keeping them, or refinancing, I should say. So I think they're keeping the interest rates on mortgages a little bit higher to mitigate some of that demand for now. And then I think the other thing is mortgage rates are linked to a different set of bank rates than some of the commercial paper that's out there. So, but it's definitely something to look into. If you've got loans, can you refinance them? Can you take a payment holiday? I know a lot of the banks are doing that right now. But look into it with your lender and understand what it means, because some of these payment holidays mean, I get 3 months payment holiday and then I have to pay those 3 months in month 4. And some of them mean you get 3 month payment holiday and you can tag it on to the end of your loan. So you need to be very careful about understanding what your lender means by that. Okay, let's go to the next page here. We're going to skip forward.
We got someone raising a hand here. Eric, you can go ahead and come off mute.
Oh, okay. Yes. Hi. Thanks for taking my.
Trying to talk, I think.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Eric.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I own a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym in Rockland, California. I'm a single member LLC. And I'm curious if you know whether I would qualify for the small business loans and having that loan forgiven if I spend the money. I'm a little bit at a loss on how the qualification process works, whether I need employees or not. Do you know how, if I would possibly qualify still under my situation?
Sorry, we missed the first part of that question. Can you repeat it?
Yes. Hi. I own a LLC. I'm a single member LLC.
Yep.
Would I qualify without having employees for the forgiveness of the loan? Do you know how that works? How the loans work?
I can speak to that just briefly.
Yeah.
They only just announced them on Friday, right? So people are still working through them. But in the language, it does specifically say that sole proprietors and LLCs and independent contractors are still eligible. I'm not quite sure how they're going to determine the payroll-related expenses that you had from that, but there will be some sort of eligibility in there. I encourage you to reach out to your lending institution, your bank. They should have a small business association administration, arm there that should be able to answer your questions for you, as they're the ones who are going to be actually handling the loans. So if you reach out to your bank, they should be able to provide you additional details. But like I said, we only just got this stuff on Friday, so people are still trying to figure it out.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Eric, can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
So do you have the link to the SBA disaster loan?
Yes, I have applied to the new streamlined version yesterday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we don't know who's going to qualify or not, but I do encourage everyone who is a small business owner to apply for the SBA disaster loan that has the first 10,000 forgivable. And you will know by, I think, mid-April if you qualify or not. I think a lot of businesses should qualify, since you do have a mortgage, lease that you're paying. You do have expenses at the business, and your business got affected by the coronavirus. You probably closed the business. So apply for the SBA disaster loan, and then probably by mid-April you will know.
I'll also add to that there are two different loan programs currently being administered by the SBA. The first, like you just mentioned, Mimi, is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. That's been around for, I think, a decade or more. And it provides, I think, up to $10,000, or maybe it's $25,000 of loan. But then there's what was passed over the weekend, the Paycheck Protection Program under the recent stimulus package. So this is what I was referring to, Eric, when I said that you should be eligible for it. Typically, the way that this one works is a business has to just prove to their lending institution that their typical payroll costs in a month were, let's say, $10,000, and then that business will be eligible for a loan that is 250% of that amount. So in this example, a $25,000 loan. And the cool thing about these ones is that the entirety of that loan is forgivable if you meet certain criteria. Primarily, that is just to keep yourself in business and keep employing people. So Mimi, I definitely agree with you. You should look into the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, but also look into the Paycheck Protection Program, which was just announced on Friday.
Do you have a link for that one, for the Paycheck program?
Yes, and it's in our guide. If you have it downloaded on, I think, slide 18 or 19, but I can also reach out to you directly afterwards, Mimi, and send it to you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
That's great.
Thanks. Thank you for that information. I think that's the one I may have looked at first and saw the payroll language in there. And because I don't have any employees and there was that payroll part, it confused me a little bit. Thanks for the answer. I'll look into that offline. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So we got about 15 minutes left, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff on here. We're holding additional events every Tuesday at 10 o'clock, so we'll cover some more stuff. But what I wanted to do now is just pause for a second and invite people, if you have specific questions that you want to ask, instead of us going through sort of more stuff here, if you have specific questions, feel free to ask them now. and we'll try and get to that in the last 15 minutes, or if there's a section that you want me to go to, I can go to that as well. So I'll just pause for a minute and then see if anybody's got specific questions.
Hey, Nick.
Yep.
It's Stephanie Lewis again. It sounds like you have a lot of experience in working at HP. And if I'm a small business owner, my other concern is how do I, lead people during this kind of time so that they're, not working from a place of fear, but working from a place of engagement. What's been your experience?
Wow, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, this is a super challenging environment. People, if you're familiar with sort of Maslow's hierarchy, sort of pyramid of wants and needs, the bottom part of that is that people have basic needs of security, of somewhere to live, and the ability to be able to put food on the table. That is the most important thing I think many people are now looking at and saying, okay, well, how am I going to do this? How am I going to keep a roof over my family's head? How am I going to continue to, feed my family? Those are the sort of base needs. People aren't thinking about stuff like, where am I going to go on holiday next year, right? Because that is no longer the top of the sort of food chain. They're looking at the stuff that's more basic. So I think the way that I would do this is firstly, be open and frank with your employees. Employees, I believe, have good sort of BS detectors, and they know if you're giving them some kind of BS. So tell people about your business situation and what it means. Tell them about the things that you're trying to do. And then the other thing that I found has been really, really helpful is ask them for their opinion and their help. Try to get them to buy in to help and provide the solution. So maybe you don't have to lay employees off. Maybe if you're having a conversation with them and exploring the different opportunities and lay out what the opportunities are, say, hey, here's the opportunities for us to stay in business. One, I have to lay a bunch of people off. Two, we all have to take a pay cut of X%. Three, whatever, that may be. Maybe it's a temporary furlough or people only working for, 2 weeks a month instead of, the whole month. So lay out potential options and have a discussion with your staff if you can, and try to figure out if there's something that you can get people to agree to, because it's not going to alleviate all of their concerns, but it's going to give them a certain amount of what's the word I'm looking for? Security, a certain amount of confidence that, hey, if we do this, then the company I work for is going to survive beyond the end of the crisis, and then I'll have a job to come back to. That is something that you may find you get a lot more traction with employees than just saying, hey, I looked at everything and I'm going to lay half of you off. Because first of all, the half that get laid off right at the beginning, obviously they're going to be impacted. The half the employees that are left, they're going to be sitting there thinking, am I next? When is it going to happen to me? And I'm not saying that you're not going to have to do this, but what I'm trying to say is try to explore other opportunities here. Try to figure out what you can do to keep your employees, because when things get back to normal or some semblance of normal, you're going to need to ramp up again. You're going to need those employees to be able to do that. And if you haven't got them, then the first thing you're going to have to do is go out and hire people, and that's going to take time. It's going to be expensive, and you're not necessarily going to get back the people that you had before.
Nick, if I can just add a couple things, because I think, Stephanie, that's a really good question, because I think what everyone's dealing with right now is just a massive amount of uncertainty, right? So I think two things I would add is be empathetic. Everyone's dealing with this, and everyone's trying to navigate this thing the best that they can. There's no silver bullet to get through this thing unscathed. And so I think that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is, and I've actually been really impressed by a lot of companies, find the opportunity in it, right? Pivot. You look at restaurants that you were concerned that would close, and they've gotten really savvy about delivering food and or doing takeout, and throwing in a roll of toilet paper with the dinner, or throwing in a drink with dinner, or otherwise. So Eric asked the question about jiu-jitsu. I've seen a lot of institutions go to virtual sessions, right? To the extent that you can, and it may or may not work in your specific environment or your company, but I think find opportunity to pivot, to change the way you deliver your good or service, if possible. I think would be the only other things I would add to what Nick pointed out.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks, Sean Michael.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? Anyone online with questions, Chad?
I think, is Eric trying to ask a question right now? You're on mute.
Okay, got it. To touch two buttons. I have done virtual jujitsu, and so if there are anybody that have friends that are doing gyms, jujitsu or martial arts, there is a way to do it to keep people going. So it's been working, and not all of my clients are online with me on Zoom, but about 25% are, and they love it. And it's keeping people's stress levels down, keeping their immunities up, and they appreciate it. So pass that along to your friends that own martial arts gyms.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. That's great advice. And I think not just martial arts. I think anything like that. I've seen a lot of. I got a friend in England who's a fitness trainer, and he's been posting fitness videos online for people to follow. And now, while I wouldn't say it's necessarily a new thing, this guy's a personal trainer, and it's hard to be a personal trainer when you can't be personal with people. So I think trying to do that kind of stuff, I think, is important. I know certainly for my company, we're just a small business. There's just a handful of us here. One of the reasons we decided to pivot and start, providing these free sessions was because, we've just figured out we're probably not going to get any new customers right now, because this isn't the kind of spend, consulting and advisory services are not the kind of thing that people spend money on when they're trying to figure out how to stay in business. So, rather than us just kind of go quiet and, play video games and other stuff for the next, month or whatever, we thought that we could pivot and start to share some of our experiences with other companies and other businesses to help them. And certainly, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to, my favorite restaurants and places like that, and ask them about, if there's anything that we can do to help them. I'm going to ask them directly. So, because at the end of the day, I want these businesses still doing business in a month's time, in 2 months' time, in 6 months' time. So that's kind of how we're trying to to help here. And I think there's a lot of companies that try to figure out how to do their thing. So don't be afraid to ask, I think. And I like your point on that, Eric. Any other questions? We're kind of reaching the top of the hour. So what I would say is that we're available. Everything's available for free online. If you have questions, you can reach us directly via email, via cell phone or whatever, and we'd happily come spend time with you on your specific problems. Again, we're not charging anything for this, so feel free to take advantage of what we've got. What we've got on offer right now. So with that, I think, Charlie, is there anything else you wanted to cover?
You just a reminder that we're doing this every Tuesday at 10 a.m. If you're joining next week, we're going to start off with the slide that you currently see, evaluate your labor strategy. We have about 4 or 5 slides in there that are really designed to help you decide if I need to do layoffs, and if it's really necessary, and if there are other steps I can take beforehand. So I encourage you to look into that one and sign up there. Again, it's free, and we're available for help offline as well.
Yeah, so with that, I wish you all good luck in this challenging environment. Obviously, we all need to pull together and do what we can here. So stay safe and stay in business. Take care, everyone.